Hey, drone nerds, Andrew here. Today we have a really special interview with Bilmes of Inspired Flight.
Appreciate you having me on.
Glad to have you. Real quick, tell us about Inspired Flight.
Yeah, so Inspired Flight is a domestic aircraft manufacturer. We're really focused on that medium to heavy lift space of the UAS market, kind of think 10 to 55 pounds, what we call medium and heavy lift. We got our start back in late 2016, originally actually as a components manufacturer. The original kind of idea for Inspired Flight was to build a really unique motor technology that had an integrated electronic speed controller. And then pretty quickly realized that wasn't going to be a very scalable business model for us as a kind of a young Californian-based startup. So we made the pivot in late 2017, 2018 to building full commercial drone platforms. I think that's really kind of where we've focused since, really leveraging that background of manufacturing our own components, really understanding what insides and what makes up our system, and translating that into a full product end-to-end solution based on those components. I think that's really allowed us kind of a leg up in the industry where we've really been able to lead with quality because we've been primarily the controllers and the ones building what goes into our aircraft versus just pulling completely off the shelf components and producing something from there.
So let me ask you this. Now that you have your flagship, which is the 1200A, what was kind of like a Cliff Notes version of that process of, hey, we can't just do components, we need to make our own drone. Like, that seems really daunting. What was that process like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the first system we came out with was called the IVE-750, which was our smaller kind of quadcopter. And then how we got into the heavy lift space was pretty cool story, and I think definitely a few strokes of luck for Inspired Flight and how we got there. Something that myself and my other co-founder Mark never could have seen coming in 2016, 2017 when we decided to be an primarily American and friendly country manufacturing company. So already kind of building our supply chains outside of China. What we never could have seen coming was in 2020 these new federal regulations coming down in the NDAA Section 848, basically saying, hey, federal government, especially Department of Defense, there's some products that you can no longer use. So that was an opportunity for Inspired Flight to lean into kind of a supply chain we've already been developing to comply with that. So based off that, we actually, through kind of a network, through our network, we got linked up with an Air Force customer that had a large fleet of some other Chinese heavy lift system that they no longer really could use. And the requirement came to us was, hey, Inspired Flight, you guys are looking to grow. Can you develop and deliver us basically an American-friendly, government-compliant heavy lift system that takes a lot of these similar characteristics and applies it to what you guys are going to do? So that's really how we got into the heavy lift game, was based off that customer demand. So we originally came out with the IF-1200, which we delivered towards the end of 2020 to these Air Force customers. And that product did very, very well, achieved Blue UAS status. And then kind of a year and a half, a couple of years into that, we really recognized that there was so much room to grow with that product based on just where Inspired Flight had gotten to. IF-1200 did a great job of meeting that customer's need for that specific ecosystem it was going into. But as Inspired Flight tried to scale and really just serve more industrial customers, we recognize things like ergonomics, flight time, all these new features and capabilities that we were able to improve that original system is kind of how we got to the IF-1200A.
That's awesome. It's cool that like the Air Force was like, hey, we need some drones, Inspired Flight. You guys want to be the ones? That's
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were fortunate to know the prime contractor that was involved in that ecosystem. And I mean, any successful startup's going to have a few good kind of strokes of luck along the way. Just a lot of things that we would never have seen coming. And fortunately, we're in a good position to execute upon some cool opportunities.
That's really cool. It shows some adaptability when it comes to your processes of designing and manufacturing. That's really cool. So since the Air Force kind of took up the 1200A, would you say that the customer base now is still mostly DoD, or who's the main consumer for the 1200A as it stands today?
Yeah, no, actually, the answer to your question would basically be absolutely not. We certainly do have a really good base of Department of Defense customers, including some of those exact same Air Force customers. But today, about 80% of Inspired Flight's business is commercial, really focusing more on large-scale engineering firms, large surveying firms, heavy industrial utilities, whether that be electric, wind, oil, and gas. So that industrial world is where most of our business is today. Looking forward, there's definitely kind of a dual use strategy going on in Inspired Flight. Of course, with us being one of those Blue UAS certified manufacturers, which is a Department of Defense program, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that come our way from that program. But in terms of just where we think the market's going, where our best value to the industry is really serving that industrial market. And that's where our focus is primarily. And if there's opportunities to serve the government space, all the better.
Agreed. That's serving the government space is always job security. That's never a bad thing.
In this industry, it is. I mean, that just goes back to adaptability. I think you look at this industry and the consolidations that's taken place even before Inspired Flight came along, all the way back to like 2010, kind of when I think the industry really started to take off, pardon the pun. If you're not adaptable in this industry, if you're not kind of willing to roll with the punches and do what you need to do to stay alive and grow and scale to build a sustainable business, you're really not going to be around for very much longer. And I think there's been so many stories of that in the domestic space and the international space when it comes to the drone industry. I mean, it's a pretty impressive industry. Everybody that works in it, certainly not just Inspired Flight, they've developed some thick skin over the years.
Yeah, agreed. So in the process, coming from the 750 to the 1200, I guess specifically the 1200, other than, some of these organizations being required to use a Blue UAS certified drone, what are some of the other challenges that you were kind of tasked to address when it came to designing the 1200A?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll just start by saying a lot of our customer base is definitely folks that they have to use a Blue UAS system. They've got to use an NDA compliant system. But a lot of our customer base isn't, right? At the end of the day, like I think one of the driving beliefs for Inspired Flight is Blue UAS, NDA compliance. That's what we do, right? That's kind of Inspired Flight's baseline. But from there, it's all about the product and how does the product specifically meet the needs of the end user, right? And how is it actually helping solve your problem other than it being American? So I guess I'll start with that. But in terms of like the 1200A and really where our focus went into, when we did really kind of the landscape of the market and what was available at the time, there were multiple other kind of really high quality heavy lift systems on the market. But a couple of the main things we saw was they were very cumbersome. They weren't ergonomic in a way where one person could transport them out to the field and set up and deploy in an efficient manner. They weren't designed for modular integrations, kind of interoperability between different payloads. So that's really a kind of a strong feature of the i1200A is its ability to switch between either the full stack solutions, camera-based solutions that we offer as a company fully integrated, or working with that end user, that end user to integrate a third-party capability of their own. So that's really kind of where our focus has been, is building the i1200A into an ergonomic, easy to deploy, one-man transportable workhorse of an aerial system. That's what it's meant to be used for. It's not really meant to be babied. It's meant to be used in kind of the rugged workhorse and flown 6, 8, 10 hours a day to get your job done.
So I guess kind of leading into this next question, brag about it to me. What are some of the features that set the 1200A apart from everything else?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest one is going to be its flight time and its payload capacity. Certainly the two most obvious, but full 20-pound payload capacity remaining under a 55-pound kind of limit. So the i1200A is going to have by far the broadest payload capacity under Part 107 rules. And in that same category, it's going to have the most flight time. We're going from about 25 to just under 45 minutes across that full flight time curve. And of course, most of our customers certainly aren't using no payload, and most aren't using 20 pounds of payload as well. But it really allows kind of for that future flexibility of the system. We've got customers that are doing multi-sensor configurations. That's become a really popular one. As LiDAR technology has grown, we're seeing a lot of LiDARs mounted on the system, also with like a photogrammetry system on board. So it really allows for that flexibility. In terms of kind of some other features, bottom line is its build quality and reliability, and some cool safety factors on our board. So there's redundancies everywhere. Even down to the motors, where if you were to lose a motor, whether to a motor failure, which certainly isn't common, propeller failure, bird strike, whatever that is, the aircraft's actually going to be able to maintain control to the user, and you're going to be able to still very sluggishly, but get that aircraft down to the ground safely instead of it just effectively gyroing out of the sky. So redundancy and just build quality. We offer, Inspired Flight offers through our dealers up to 3 years of extended warranty on our aircraft. And I think what that's the feedback we've gotten from that is, regardless if that customer is purchasing that extended warranty or not, it really speaks to kind of our commitment to the product. Our goal is to be very different to, I think, what's happened a lot in the drone industry over the past 5 years, which is, hey, we're a new startup, we're going to sell you our new drone, right? And 9 months later, I'm going to come back to you and say, hey, I'm sorry, I know I sold that to you 9 months ago, but the one you got, we're end of lifing that, and I need to sell you a new one. That is not our goal. Our goal is to build basically tools and machines that last those operators for years to come.
So speaking of those operators, what would it need to kind of get ramped up into using the 1200A? Is there a learning curve? Like, let's say if you have someone that's never flown a drone before, or someone who has, what does that look like getting into the Inspired Flight ecosystem?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we are fortunate to use kind of fairly, it's been modified a little bit by us, but we're using an open source ecosystem that is fairly ubiquitous in the drone world at this point. In terms of a learning curve, there definitely is a learning curve. Of course, if you've never flown a drone, that's one thing, right? You've got to learn how to fly a drone. And we certainly help with that. We offer amazing training programs, online documentation, startup videos, really just try to support that customer through the adoption of the capability. But also for a lot of our customers that are coming from a different brand or a different product, that learning curve is much easier. I mean, flying the drone, at the end of the day, flying the drone is flying the drone, right? They're all going to operate the same way. Really, where the learning curve comes into is just understanding the different ecosystem, right? Like let's say you're a hardcore PC user your whole life, right? And somebody forces you to go to Mac, right? You're going to have to learn how to kind of interact with that system. So it's not really a learning curve of, oh, hey, this drone is different than that drone. They all serve really the same purpose. It's just, how do I understand what is the difference of the mission planning software? Where are the difference in my flight modes? Things like that.
So are there any accessories or peripherals that someone would need to get the most out of the 1200A?
There could be. I mean, that's really going to depend on your payload at the end of the day and what your kind of objective is. For example, for a lot of our LiDAR customers, that are flying LiDAR for construction, property development, surveying, mapping, whatever that may be. A lot of them prefer to use the UGCS, Universal Ground Control Software. It's mission planning software coming out of a company called SPH Engineering. There's a really tight integration for the i1200A there. And some of those customers, they prefer to use that system because it allows for like automated calibrations of the LiDAR, or allows the drone to fly what's called a spline turns, a rounded corner versus a kind of a 90-degree start and stop. So it really is going to depend on the use case. But I'd say for the majority of users, majority of operators, when they're purchasing a fully configured system for Inspired Flight, especially when they're purchasing a payload that comes with it, we're really delivering everything that they need. Whether if they're buying a thermal camera, they're getting a set of thermography software with a kind of a universal license. The mission planning software is free to download to use. So we really try our best to, what you buy is what you get, and that's going to serve you. And we're not going to kind of nickel and dime you over the years to get more money out of you, basically. We're, of course, excited to grow and scale with you and sell you guys more drones as your program grows. but we're not going to block off any features because we can.
That's refreshing to hear. And then, what's the future looking like for Inspired Flight, both for the 1200A and other product lines that you have?
Yeah, so where a lot of our focus is right now is on kind of improving the UI, the UX of the system. As an American drone manufacturer, we certainly recognize our weakness against some of the Chinese giants out there is just the comfortability and familiarity of the software, how easy it is to use a camera, access new settings. So a lot of our focus right now is more on the software side, and really trying to streamline that user experience and make the system overall more efficient to use. Of course, there's always developmental engineering and improvements kind of that we're looking at the system. From the hardware side, a lot of Inspired Flight's focus, actually a good majority of Inspired Flight's focus right now on the hardware side is in the launch of our upcoming IF800 Tomcat. So that's the IF800 is really going to be our replacement to that original IF750 aircraft that we came out with a few years ago. Kind of that smaller 20-pound-ish Group 1 quadcopter, really designed at mapping capabilities, inspection, applications, public safety, a big one that we're focusing on with that. So we're really in the process of getting that out to market and expecting to hit our first double-digit deliveries in Q1. So we're really excited to basically get out into the nation and start getting that into folks' hands and showing that new system. So that's really where our focus is going. We're just, bottom line, is committed to kind of those two families of aircraft, that heavy lift IF1200A system and that more medium lift, kind of what the IF800 is going to work for. So
looking past the IF800 on into the future, where do you kind of see Inspired Flight ending up in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you think it'll fit within the overall drone industry that's been growing explosively over the past couple of years?
And it absolutely has. Yeah, our goal is to continue improving and developing kind of the end-to-end solutions to our customers and just solving a larger part of the value curve, where we can kind of offer a solution, deliver a solution to an end user's door through our dealer partners, and they're able to go and do what they need to do with it very, very easily, whether that's reducing risk for human employees, folks like linemen, whether that's making more money on their bottom line by using a more efficient technology, whatever that is. That's really going to be our goal. So focusing on how do we do a better job at integrating payload systems into our aircraft and providing the user kind of just a well-rounded Inspired Flight experience, right? Versus what's been, I think the industry's made a ton of progress on, but the Chinese giants certainly have excelled at, which is not delivering kind of a disparate systems where we're delivering your drone, you're getting your payload, and then you've got to work through a bunch of issues. So that's really where our focus is going, but we're dedicated to that electric multi-rotor space. Our goal is, of course, to be the leading domestic manufacturer in that space. And we see so much room for growth within that market. And I think as we're, I don't know, 6-7 years into Inspired Flight's journey, I think while we definitely have really large aspirations for us, we also want to kind of keep our focus narrow and really just execute well on what our core competencies are, which is electric multi-rotor. So no plans currently to get into the fixed wing game. You're likely never going to see a hybrid system come out of Inspired Flight. We know what we're good at, and we're just going to continue to improve upon that capability and better serve the market.
Yeah, I think that sticking with your strengths is always a good thing. So tell me, where can we find Inspired Flight online?
Yes, I mean, inspiredflight.com is always a great resource, a good place to start. We actually just launched a new website a couple months ago. Within there, you'll find links to our online documentation and support center. We try to do a really good job of just being accessible at the end of the day, whether you're working with the sales team, the business development team, whether you're trying to get to our technical support and engineers. Inspired Flight's always going to be accessible. So whether you're contacting us through dealers like Drone Nerds, or whether directly to us, bottom line is we're going to take care of you. But yeah, a lot of really cool information on the website. We've got a great YouTube channel that shows basically startup videos, how to use our systems, training guides. Yeah, that's basically where you'll find us.
Perfect. Well, having some hands-on experience with the products that you have out, including the Tomcat, seeing where you are now after only 6 or 7 years of operation, it's really incredible, and I'm excited to see where you'll be in the next few years. So, Adam, thanks so much for taking your time to talk and hang out with us today. Everybody, please go follow Inspired Flight, and we'll see you next time.
I appreciate it, Andrew.